Let's get started with today's presentation. This is another in our series of Ask the Expert webinars where you, our attendees, drive the content by submitting questions for our great group of experts. I know you all kept this team pretty busy the last couple of weeks. Over about 150 questions were submitted. So our panelists have reviewed, categorized, and have answers pretty much for all of those questions, I'm pretty sure. And I know they're eager to get rolling, so we're going to let them get started in just a minute. A couple items before we get started. I'm not sure I ever received so many emails before the event asking if this webinar was going to be recorded. And yes, this webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording via email within the next 24 hours. If you don't get that email or you miss it, just send us an email or check in the resource library section of MaritzCX.com. It'll be there. So, we like it when you visit our website. So if you're there to check out today's recording, look around for other webinars or white papers you might have missed, there are a lot of great resources, of course, in that section. So we're pretty confident that of the, like I said, about 150 questions that were submitted for today's webinar, most of the questions that you might have are going to be addressed during the presentation. However, if you still have an outstanding question that didn't get answered, feel free to submit it by typing in that into the question box on your screen. We're not planning a formal Q&A time at the end, but we will have an expert will get back with you and email directly to you the answer to your question after the event. So thank you for that question. So let's get to today's presenters. And let me say up front that we're missing one of our experts, and that's Doug Nagelin. He was unable to be here with us today. But we are in very capable hands with Jennifer Bassini, Stacy Bulger, and Jen Rubin. So I'm going to start introductions with Jen Rubin. Jen is Senior Director, Solution Strategy, and in this capacity, she works with the MaritzCX Client Success Team to share best practices in how clients are improving customer understanding, driving insights across survey programs and operational data, and how they are using, or they can use technology to be more effective in sharing CX feedback and facilitate taking action. Jen has over 20 years of experience in CX and marketing research. Next is Stacy Bulger. Stacy is Senior Director of Strategic Consulting from MaritzCX, and in this role, she helps organizations develop and apply the capabilities necessary to understand customer needs and apply their customer insights to drive tangible business results. Stacy has over 15 years of client-side experience leading customer-focused efforts in the financial services and retail industries. And then starting us off today is Jennifer Bassini. Jennifer is Senior Director of CX Solution Strategy for MaritzCX, and she is responsible for providing CX consultative support to organizations that are looking to implement new CX programs or enhance their existing efforts. And Jennifer is aligned with the financial services industry, where she has been helping clients for about 16 years. So with that, I think my intro is done, and I'm going to hand it over to JP. JP.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks everybody for joining us today. As Tom mentioned, we were pleasantly overwhelmed by the number of questions that we received, so we'll talk about that in just a minute. So today's agenda is really just going to be just focus on your questions, which is the intent of this Ask the Expert webinar. Along the way, we will be sharing our recommended approach, best practices, and point of view, and also tying into some real experiences that we have with clients today who are going through similar things in terms of what you're asking about. So that's really the intent of the agenda. That's what we will be working towards today. I'm happy to be joined by Jen and Stacy as we kind of go through different topic areas. And I'll talk about the process that we went through in reviewing your questions and how we'll tackle this session in just a little bit. But to tease things up, I want to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page in terms of what we're talking about related to operationalizing CX. When we talk about operationalizing CX, we often hear things like the topics that you see on this slide. Regardless of the term or the request that you receive, what you're really interested in is understanding how you can take customer feedback and use it. How can feedback be used to transform your organization, How can you engage in a closed loop system? And ultimately, how do you create a customer-centric culture? Regardless of the request that you're receiving from your leadership or that you're asking of your teams, we understand that operationalizing CX is really about what you do with that customer feedback once you have it in hand. And MaritzCX, through our legacy and history as an organization, we've always promoted a more than measuring approach, which focuses on building accountability and promoting actionability. And so in today's Ask the Expert webinar, we will be sharing some best practices related to how we see our clients doing that and how some considerations that you can take in putting those practices in place. So when we talk about operationalizing CX, what we're really talking about is helping you generate insights from your VoC, promoting that accountability to your customer, and then having that business impact and helping to shape your strategy. All of that is encompassed in operationalizing CX. So when we think about the types of things that we often encourage, this is just kind of a sampling of those things. So case management in terms of individual remediation, tracking employee performance so that you can better coach and train so that they can ultimately deliver a better customer experience to your customers. Sometimes that involves rewards and recognition. It's critically important that your program connect to the business and that you demonstrate business value and focus VoC not only on the things that you're learning from customers, but also that linkage to outcomes and linkage to operations so that you're being purposeful in how you're taking action on the feedback that they're providing. We're going to cover a lot of those best practices in the next 45 minutes or so. So let's set the stage here for the next 45 minutes or so. We are, as Tom mentioned, we have a large number of registrants. This is obviously a topic area that many of you are struggling with, that many of you have questions about. And so, as I mentioned, we were pleasantly overwhelmed by the number of questions we received. At the time of this webinar, we've received over 150 questions from you all. And because of the sheer volume of questions, what we did was we went through a process of categorizing questions. So a lot of you were asking similar questions or related questions that we could bucket them into 4 topic areas. So today, Stacy, Jen, and I are going to tackle those 4 topic areas and highlight some of the questions that came in. And along the way, we're going to be sharing stories and best practices that'll help you get a feel for some of the considerations that go into what you're struggling with related to operationalizing CX. I will say that one thing that Jen, Stacy, and I agree on is that these topic areas are very meaty. And one thing that we learned from all of your questions is that we need to have subsequent Ask the Expert sessions to address in a more deep way some of the questions that you have. And so please be on the lookout for a personal invite for subsequent sessions where we'll go into some of these topic areas in a more deep way. For today, we'll cover best practices at a high level and some of those stories for these 4 topic areas. The first one is foundational. Many of you asked some really, really smart questions about just what it takes to, about the basics. What questions to ask, how to structure data, how to best leverage text analytics. We consider those foundational questions to any CX program, but they were smart in that you realize that that foundation is critical to ultimately the actions that you take. The second topic area is inner and outer loop best practices. A lot of this is what we typically equate with just taking action based on data. This category includes all questions related to case management, identifying systemic opportunities that lead to action planning, and we'll cover some best practices that you can take to take direct action based on customer feedback in this category. The third category is analytics, linkage, and integration. This is a pretty broad category that focuses on the types of data sources that should be integrated together, how to integrate, and best practices around linkage analyses, and some stories about how you can better tell better stories based on all the data that you have in hand. And then the final topic area is organizational leadership and communication. These questions are related to culture, building accountability, governance, and how to communicate results, and basically how to get people to care about your CX program. So with that, I think we should go ahead and just get right into the topic areas. I'm going to turn it over to Jen Rubin, who will focus on the first two topic areas. Jen, you ready for foundational?
I am. Thank you, Jennifer. As Jennifer mentioned, we received a number of questions about the best way to get a program started. We've been working with a number of clients who are looking to either completely overhaul an outdated program or launch a new program from scratch because their organization has become more customer focused. And one of the best places to start when you're launching a new program or remodeling an existing one is to examine the customer journey. Ideally, this is done through a formal journey mapping process, but often when we're at this redesign stage or launch stage, budgets don't fully allow for this. So we've been working with clients to assist with a lighter touch journey framework approach that is a little bit more budget friendly and faster to implement. The process entails conducting a cross-functional employee workshop and some employee interviews to break down the key steps of the customer journey. This allows us to build a journey framework that provides employee insights into the aspects of the journey that are perceived to be going well or maybe not well, and identify the internal operational data available to measure customer success along that journey. Once in place, a customer journey framework or map can help us identify the elements of the journey that need more insights from the customer in order to improve. In the case of one of our B2B clients who is in the process of overhauling their customer experience program, the journey framework process allowed their team to identify that the cancellation process presented the greatest opportunity to improve customer understanding and impact retention. So a transactional survey was quickly developed to learn more. On the heels of that effort, we were also able to design a more effective relationship survey since we better understood all the aspects of their entire journey. We often get asked about what are the best metrics to include in a CX survey. Ultimately, the best metrics are the ones that are going to help your organization take action on the results. If you listen to industry analysts, they'll tell you that the three key areas to measure are effort, emotion, and the need fulfillment that you're delivering. Many clients like NPS because they feel it's an easy to understand metric across the organization. And depending on the industry, there are some benchmarks readily available. However, the key metric that's selected for your organization to monitor should be the one that's most strongly correlated with the outcomes you're trying to achieve. And of course, an open-ended question allows the customer to share in their own words more detail on their experience working with you. When launching or relaunching a new program, it's important to build a plan for what is reasonable to accomplish and what will be the impact on the organization to roll out that feedback. Launching a new program will likely require a multi-phased approach, so it's good to set annual goals and outline a plan that you aspire to over the next couple years to help define what is and is not included within the initial stages of the program launch. If you're just getting started, Dave Fish of CuriosityCX has outlined 4 principles of customer experience design in a blog post. And I like those principles because I think they set good philosophy in getting started. The guiding principles to your success in implementing a customer experience initiative lay in being simple, fast, local, so if it fails, the risks are relatively low, and iterative. Don't confuse a suboptimal execution with theory failure. And finally, make sure that your customer experience strategy aligns with your overall brand strategy. This will allow for greater executive level support as well as a better guide for employees as they make customer decisions. I'm going to see if I can switch headphones. I'm not sure if that rattling's coming from me. But next I'm going to talk about, we received a lot of questions about best practices for both inner loop and outer loop processes. Inner loop, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Here we go. I'm not sure that rattling is going to stop. Inner loop refers to the individual learning, behavior change, and relationship management that occurs one customer at a time. Outer loop refers to the root cause analysis, prioritization, and implementation of structural improvements for all customers. Let's talk about inner loop first. Many organizations demonstrate their entire customer experience program ROI based on the identification and follow-up that occurs with vulnerable customers. So it's important to get this right and to continue to make incremental improvements over time. Sometimes, in order to identify best practices, we need to start by understanding what the biggest issues or challenges are with a process. And working across many different client programs, the following 5 areas tend to be the biggest complaints we hear about a closed-loop process. The first, and probably by far, is the inadequate resources to address the volume of customers we'd like to follow up with. The second is process inefficiency. The third, poor communication back to the customer or the frontline employee who is engaging with that customer. Fourth, opportunity missed with passive or happy customers when follow-ups is prioritized for low scores only. And finally, having a challenging escalation process when various issues require different parts of the organization to get involved to resolve that issue. So what are best-in-class organizations doing about these closed-loop challenges? Let's start with inadequate resources. Ideally, we're following up with every customer who invested their time to provide us with feedback. This lets them know that they've been heard, encourages them to continue to provide feedback, and reinforces that this is a relationship, not just a transaction. But the reality is that depending on the volume of customers and employee resources available, this is not likely to be feasible. So we take different strategies to address this. One of the strategies that we're taking with a client who's still in their first couple of years of their program is a crawl, walk, run approach since resources are low. So we're starting with follow-up with extreme detractors, those who provided a 0 to 4 rating. The plan is that once their team is efficient with this process, we'll expand to 0 to 6. And eventually we'll include a trigger that actually combines the likelihood to recommend and likelihood to remove scores. A number of clients use this as an opportunity to define a more complex algorithm to determine what combination of factors requires a direct follow-up by phone or email, maybe something that's more scripted, a scripted follow-up response that just occurs by email, or Yeah, I'm back. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened there.
Okay.
All right. I'll pick back up where I left off. All right. Thank you. So I was sharing another strategy is that organizations combine a number of factors to create an algorithm of how they're going to respond across issues. Those factors can include customer revenue and tenure. It can include the type of problem and how easy that problem is, how easy it is to resolve that customer issue, and create a tiered approach or a tiered strategy to handling case management. The important thing when using an automated or highly scripted response to a customer is to make sure that it still conveys emotion and the brand personality within the generated response. Otherwise, this strategy can really fall flat. In order to be more selective about the types of survey responses that will trigger a rep to follow up, many clients are also now using text analytics to generate case alerts. This definitely requires some refinement over time, but it can help deliver a more personalized response and experience for customers. Let's move on to talk about closed-loop process inefficiency. This can occur when individuals assigned to the case manager role do it sporadically, or maybe they have too many cases assigned, and this is viewed as a supplemental responsibility to the regular role. It can also occur when follow-up occurs at individual journey touch points, but is not overseen by someone across the entire customer journey or across the company's entire product portfolio. customers can become frustrated with the additional effort required to navigate multiple issues across your organization. This is often why many organizations choose to use a centralized team for their customer follow-up. A centralized team quickly learns how to resolve common issues and can identify which resolutions drive customer loyalty and which ones leave customers still vulnerable. A centralized team may also be in a better position to view the customer's relationship with the organization across the journey or product portfolio. And a centralized team may be in a better position to deliver a more timely response to a customer. However, sometimes using a centralized team leads to one of the other challenges we see with closed loop, and that can be poor communication back to the frontline employee who had that initial interaction with the customer. To address this, organizations need to look for ways to be very transparent about customer feedback across the organization. Some tactics that organizations may take involve starting each work shift by sharing select customer verbatim comments with the team from the previous day, utilizing things like our customer advocacy boards, which display customer verbatim comments in common areas of the organization, or requiring that employee coaching occurs as part of the closed loop process. With poor communication back to the frontline employee, we also want to make sure we're reviewing poor communication back to the customer. Some clients address this by instituting a double closed loop process, which ensures that the customer's issue has truly been resolved. So once a case manager marks a case as closed and resolved, a quick survey is generated to check with the customer that the issue was resolved to their satisfaction. And if not, the case is reopened and requires some additional follow-up. The fourth obstacle that we see is too much focus on the negative. And having a closed loop process that has too much focus on the negative can have multiple unintended consequences. So these may include creating an overall dreadful perception of your CX program across the employee organization. If high scores aren't shared and celebrated, if you only focus on the negative. You can miss opportunity with customers who are willing to purchase more or become a vocal advocate of your organization. If you're not following up and reinforcing that positive feedback that they shared with you. And there's this opportunity to celebrate employees who are exhibiting best-in-class behaviors that you want to take time to highlight to other employees to exemplify. So it's really important to make sure you're creating a process to alert managers of high scores and show ways to celebrate that employee and thank your customer. Finally, the fifth point is a challenging or inconsistent escalation process. And this can result in caseworkers closing cases without full or any resolution. And one thing we work with clients to do is make sure that they're doing an ongoing review of cases closed without full resolution. And that needs to be done routinely to determine if the issue is the issues of resulting from non-closed cases or non-fully resolved cases is location or area specific. Is it a result of lack of engagement with the process, or is it the result of issues that are outside of the caseworker's area of influence? Upon further review of these cases, some clients find that more support is needed for caseworkers right in the direct case management form. For one of our clients, the issue is that caseworkers just simply want to close the case as quickly as possible to meet internal benchmarks. So those service level agreements can have some negative impacts by causing caseworkers to actually close them faster than they're ready. The other issue is that they don't have the authority to resolve an outer loop issue like packaging. So they follow up with a customer and listen, but they don't really take further action. In these situations, companies need to build in a system to allow caseworkers to get this information to the VoC executive team so that systemic issues can be addressed. Capturing the root cause on cases can help with this. So let's talk about those larger issues that do get escalated to the VoC executive team. or the steering committee that may be in place. We hear a lot of challenges with this process, and I think this process is even harder for a lot of organizations to implement. Here are some of the biggest challenges we hear about an outer loop process. Number one is lack of executive team engagement. Two is organizational silos that prevent addressing issues that require cross-functional resolution. Three is not having a clear or agreed upon prioritization process of issues. So maybe just a little work gets done across a spattering of things. Number four can be that the voice of the customer feedback is not used in the product development process. So making sure that the feedback about actual products is getting ingrained in that decision of how you're investing in your products. And five, not celebrating successes when we do have them in this area, because this is hard to accomplish, and we want to recognize the cross-functional efforts that go in place to get this done. So one way clients are addressing the outer loop process is by expanding beyond dashboard reporting and creating quarterly, semi-annually, or annual customer experience summaries across surveys, which include a comprehensive analysis to help identify the issues that are most important to customers. Then they assemble a cross-functional team to share those results and have that paired with a facilitated work session to talk about the most important drivers of strong customer experience and how the organization is going to take action to improve those areas. When we do action planning work sessions, we outline the process into about 7 steps. I'm going to take you through those. So the first step is to identify the opportunity. So looking at your feedback from your customers, what are the top opportunities that you want to make sure your organization is addressing? Data should support this. The second step, and this is an important one, is to define that item. So let's say you've identified that having knowledgeable reps is an opportunity to improve. What are the data sources telling you about what this means to the customer, and what does it mean to your organization? This may require some additional qualitative research to truly understand. Does knowledgeable reps mean that the rep needs to be better armed with greater access to information about the customer and their purchase history and interaction with you? Or does it mean that reps need to be better trained on company products and services? The next step is to identify the barriers to improvement. So this is an area that works well in the cross-functional team because a lot of times there are a number of barriers, and the barriers come from different areas of the organization. So this is a great brainstorming activity, and the team should fluidly put up everything and anything that comes to mind as a barrier to improving that area. Then once you've pulled together a list of barriers to improving that, the team should brainstorm and identify potential actions to take to make improvements in that area. Once that comprehensive list of actions has come up with, it's time to start assigning some ownership. So talk about who could own different areas to improve. Then we want to tie in what does improvement look like, and how do we define and measure success of the improvement. Once we have those things in place, now is the time we want to go back with that cross-functional team and prioritize those solutions. So which ones are going to have the greatest impact, which ones are really reasonable for us to accomplish, and let's prioritize our efforts and resources against those. This needs to take a balance of the items that are just do-it items, so low effort, quick wins, with some of the higher effort initiatives that need to be agreed upon across that steering committee review. Creating a cadence for the action planning work sessions is important to help drive continuous improvement in the organization. The solutions and participants should change over time, but including insights from the customer experience should always be central to helping identify opportunities and define what those opportunities are. When the organization is successful in addressing or improving a systemic issue, you need to reinforce this success both internally and with customers. Consider letting customers know about the improvements you've made based on their survey feedback within the text of future survey invitations. It shows you're listening. Not all systemic problems require a comprehensive action planning work session. Some organizations are adopting a team huddle approach. This allows individuals in similar roles the opportunity to compare notes on how they're addressing similar challenges. Harvard Business Review recently published an article on the effectiveness of peer-to-peer training. These team huddles can be a form of peer-to-peer training that allows employees to talk through scenarios and think about the best ways to handle certain customer challenges. Ideally, your outer loop process involves both a formal action planning process as well as a team huddle approach. As Jennifer mentioned, I know we don't have time to address all the questions that came up on this topic. I'm sure we could host an entire webinar on this topic alone, but I'd like to save some time for Jennifer and Stacy to go through more detail on a couple other questions that came up. So I'm going to pass this off to you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Jen. So I'm happy to talk about analytics, linkage, and integration. We had a lot of interesting questions that came in related to just data sources and how you can leverage multiple data sources to establish priorities for actionability, and how you can demonstrate return on investment of the changes that you're making. And then there was an interesting question about how you maintain relevance. And so I thought I'd just spend a few minutes talking about some of these topic areas and share some insights on what we recommend. So when you're asking questions about analytics, what you're really asking questions about is how can you bring your VoC to life? And not that we have a standard set of analytics that we recommend, but there's a certain set of analytics we found to be very powerful for any CX program, and they really tie to how you can track your performance over time. So in terms of trend analyses, how you can establish priorities for where you should focus. So true driver analyses is one that we often recommend. And then how can you conduct root cause analyses with the data that you have so that you're getting to those underlying issues. The power of any CX program is two things. First, it's the ability to remediate individual customer issues, which Jen gave a lot of best practices for how you can engage in case management and effectively leverage and also evolve your case management system over time. But root cause analyses is really about how can you leverage analytics to conduct that root cause, to understand that, and to identify and understand, yes, we have an area where we're not performing very well, but what's the underlying cause? So a lot of the questions that you were asking about related to data integration and the data sources that you should be leveraging are really about how can we get to root cause. And I think that the ability to be able to link multiple data sources to have not only the context of what customers can tell you, but also the operations and systems data and employee feedback that you can integrate with that is very, very powerful to allow you to be able to tell that story related to the root cause. So when we encourage that you consider a data analytic plan that would include looking at all of the data sources that you have available to you, that not beyond just customer feedback, that could help you understand the context of what customers are experiencing with you. So a great example is, and I often use this example when I talk about polling and operational data, but if you are measuring call center experiences, think about the people that call into call centers. Typically, call centers are there to handle questions and inquiries and transactions where a customer can't do it somewhere else. And so it's probably not their preferred channel. They may or may not be happy about having to call the call center. And so, the feedback that they're providing to the rep could be skewed based on not using their preferred channel, or maybe not being able to do a particular interaction somewhere else. But so it's particularly important that you understand the reasons that they're calling, whether they were attempted to complete that transaction somewhere else in a true omni-channel approach, and then also to understand what their experiences were with the system before they talked to the live rep. Call center data in particular, those of you that have a call center touch point, you know that you have a lot of data about what they experienced even before they talk to a live rep. You know how long they were on hold. You know how many attempts they made. You know if they were transferred. You know how many cues or prompts they used to get to before they were able to get to a live person. You know how long they were on the call from start to finish. All of that data can be indicative of and influence their perceptions of that experience. And so even in some cases, even when your live rep does a great job, if the systems experience or kind of the operational experience that they had with the call is poor because of handoffs or hold times or whatever, it could be the feedback that you receive may be tainted. And so that contextual information that you get from your system is critical for you to understanding exactly what customers experience with you. And that's just one data integration story that I think can be thought through when you're really trying to understand what the root cause is for the feedback they receive. There's really only, if you look at the feedback and the program that you have in place today, there's only so much that your customers can tell you about the experiences that they have. They can certainly tell you how it made them feel. They can tell you details of what they experienced. They can leave you with the perceptions that they have, but they certainly don't have the full context of what it took for your organization to be able to deliver that, or the policies and procedures that are influencing how well your frontline staff delivers that, or the systems that they have to leverage to do that. And so integrating data sources like employee feedback, systems data, even organizational data about, maybe your FTE model for a particular touch point at a particular time can be really critical to helping you understand why customers are giving the feedback that they are and what's kind of influencing their perceptions beyond the experiences that they're having with your frontline staff or your employees. So consider all of that as part of your data analytics plan. As I mentioned, we would encourage you to establish priorities based on true driver analyses or some type of driver modeling. We would encourage you to think about how you want to look at subgroups. Particularly in root cause analyses, there was a question, what types of things should we be considering for root cause analyses? And subgroup comparisons are critical to that because you can't really understand the problem until you understand who's most impacted. And so subgroup comparisons becomes, and the ability to be able to filter the data based on key subgroups is particularly important. Another analytic technique that we recommend is linkage analyses, and that allows you to connect the feedback that you're receiving from customers either upstream to the operational systems data that you have or employee feedback that you have about a particular experience, or downstream from feedback to business outcomes and some of the financial metrics that you have. When we talk about demonstrating value of a CX program and truly operationalizing what you need to do once you have identified a root cause and an underlying issue for a problem, the success of your attempts will be 100% connected to your ability to tie that root cause to something that you can actually fix, or tying that root cause to something that you should action plan towards continuous improvement. Demonstrating value is also 100% contingent on your ability to be able to tie your feedback that you receive to business outcomes and the ability to drive outcomes that you're hoping to achieve. We find that business outcomes typically fall in 4 buckets. And so when you're thinking about how best to operationalize your feedback and connecting it through linkage analyses to business outcomes, we would encourage you to think about what your goals are and what you're hoping to drive in one of these 4 areas. Of course, you might have goals that fall in each of these 4 areas, but it's really important that you define those goals ahead of time so that you know what you're hoping to drive. So the 4 buckets that we consider are growth, retention, brand reputation or relationship deepening, and operational effectiveness. As you think through what your goals could be, it could be that you have multiple goals. You could say, we want to Our goal is to deepen relationships with customers so that they not only have one account with us, but they have 2 or 3 different types of accounts with us. That's an example of a relationship deepening goal. You might have an operational effectiveness goal, meaning that you want to be more effective with a particular touch point. It could be that you want to reduce, if you're supporting a call center interaction, you might say, we want to reduce multiple contacts. So we want to improve our first call resolution. And you set a goal in that. Part of operationalizing your CX program, and when we've seen success in doing that, it's when our clients have figured out how to best leverage VoC to connect to those business outcomes so that they can leverage feedback to make improvements that are laser focused on the goals that you're hoping to achieve as a business. And by the way, your leadership will also be very focused on that and will be very interested to know how well you're delivering on those things and what is the return on investment for doing that. A great way to think about a retention story is to leverage your VoC efforts to focus on those that are not happy with you today. So I think we can all agree that if a customer reports that they're dissatisfied with you, whatever metric you're using, whether it's NPS and they're a detractor, or whether it's overall satisfaction and they give you very poor ratings, or they're not likely to recommend you or consider you for future business, whatever your metric is that you're tracking, I think we can all agree that if they give you poor ratings in those areas, that they are an at-risk customer. And what at-risk means is that, Jen talked a lot about case management. That gives you an opportunity to follow up with them to see if you can remediate their needs. But every at-risk customer has a value associated with them. And so when you talk about the value of your VoC program, an easy way for you to talk to leadership is to say, through our VoC program, we have identified that 10% of our customers are not happy with us. And we've taken that a step further to say, these are the 10% of customers that are unhappy with us, and this is the value associated with those particular customers. It gives you a way for you to talk about, with your leadership, the number of customers that are dissatisfied and are at risk, the value associated with those, and how through your VoC efforts you've been able to identify them and you can remediate their needs. It's an easy way for you to have immediate value shown from your VoC efforts. Of course, you have to have an effective case management system in place to remediate their needs, but Jen's already given a number of best practices to support that. Finally, one area that came through, a pretty interesting question just about what do you do when your scores aren't moving? And my short response would be that in a lot of cases, especially when you have a relationship metric and your business hasn't changed that much, and you're consistently measuring, and you haven't changed a lot about your measurement system, you really it could be that your scores are moving just because there hasn't been much change. But it could be indicative of other things. And so there's some things that we would want to look at just to understand whether there is a measurement issue associated with why your scores aren't moving, or if there's an organizational issue with why scores aren't moving. So from a measurement standpoint, we look at things like, are you measuring the right things? Have you gone through a metric refresh and that maybe you need to change the performance metrics that you're focused on because they're not having the impact that you want anymore. We encourage you to leverage voice of employee here too, because your employees might say, nothing's really changed. We're delivering the same things. Customers are feeling the same things. Here's some opportunities that we have to improve things. Leverage your employees as a valuable asset to figure out how you can have the impact. So it may be a measurement reason for why scores aren't changing, but it could be that we just need to refresh things. And when we talk about a refresh, it could be then it's an opportunity for you to fold in addition to your VoC, to integrate other data sources. So change the story beyond just the metrics that you're tracking within VoC and provide more context in terms of voice of employee or systems data to help you tell a more contextual story about what customers are experiencing. I promise that it'll help you identify those root causes that will allow you to make some changes, and you will see that scores move. So look at it from two viewpoints. Look at it from a measurement standpoint. Is there an opportunity for you to refresh your measurement? And then the second viewpoint is look at it from the context for which customers experience and see if there's a way for you to tell a better, more contextual story with all the data sources that you have beyond just the scores that you're tracking. So that's what I would mention in terms of relevance. We often run into clients that are saying, our scores are just not moving, not really sure what to do. Should we expect them to move, or is this kind of our status quo? There's always things that we can investigate to understand whether it's time for a refresh or whether we just need to fold in additional data sources. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stacy to talk about our last category, which is organizational leadership and communications. Stacy?
Thanks, JP. Yeah, thank you, and great insight. So I'm going to start off with a story. Early in my career, I was a soft skills trainer, and the soft skills is in quotes, you guys. Over time, though, what used to be known as soft evolved to be considered critical skills or foundational skills, and so we would do training on that. And really the reason for that was that's really what it was. We had employees who could know everything about product, could know everything about compliance and be 100% compliant, but if an employee couldn't listen to customers or understand how to relate to them, all of that other knowledge would go to waste. So what's the connection here to our content, right? While my colleagues may beg to differ, I'd argue the same about the 4 topics we're discussing today, that foundational CX program design, the ability to appropriately measure CX in a way that is most relevant to the business, the analytics techniques that JP talked about that drive decision-making and action. These are all absolutely fundamental pieces to the CX puzzle, and they're the hard best practices and science, really, of CX. But without deliberate consideration being given to organizational culture, to people, and to communication, which is the soft stuff, right? CX will only get you so far. And based upon a lot of the questions that came in about these topics, I think there's a lot of inherent understanding of this. So let's dive into the soft stuff. Starting with organizational culture. Questions came in about how best to structure a team, where it should exist within the organization, how to leverage the right structure to drive accountability. And it's interesting to me because these sorts of questions are always near the top of a list. And yet the reality is that very few programs in their early stages are even in a position to formally structure their CX team. That's simply the reality. Rather, the structure becomes a more natural part of a program's evolution. And I have to tell you, across the 3 of us and our other colleagues at MaritzCX, we've seen successful VoC programs operationalized in structures of 50 to 100 plus employees, CX-focused employees, or in structures of literally 1 to 2. We've seen it successfully done when operations are centralized, when they're decentralized, and then sometimes when they're re-centralized, right? We've seen these structures embedded in other functions like marketing. We've seen them as separate functions altogether. So frankly, what I'm ultimately trying to say is that there's really no magic formula for a successful CX structure. And that may not be what you want to hear necessarily, but let me share with you a couple of key things that you can focus on that should provide you a little bit more insight in how to develop the right structure for your organization. Begin by focusing on desired and necessary results, right? Understand what skill sets and actions are needed to accomplish those results, and then identify where those resources fit. But the bigger part of this is to be honest with yourself about the culture of your organization. You need to understand how your organization communicates and interacts, particularly across the hierarchy. You need to understand how things get done, formally and informally. And more importantly, how to change and innovation actually occur in your organization. Our experience aside, over 10,000 CX practitioners in our CX evolution study tell us that in the early days of their programs, their CX structures were small, they were ad hoc, they were siloed. And as their organizations and their CX programs grew and matured, that structure became far more formalized. Titles began to include the term CX, and maybe even a C-level executive had a CCO added to her title. So ultimately, when it comes to organizational structure for CX teams, CX programs, know that every organization, even within the same industry, is going to be unique. But hopefully some of the insight I've just shared provides you, like I said, some of the right questions to begin asking to determine what will work best for your organization. So let's talk about my second point here, which is leadership engagement and how crucial that is to success in operationalizing a program. In fact, we had a number of questions on this, but one was so thorough that I actually want to read it verbatim before I address it. Quote, how do you convince business leaders that they need to drive the culture of caring about customer feedback and ensuring accountability when your VoC practitioners are in a shared organization without the autonomy to drive change themselves? Here's the kicker. We've been leading the horses to water for years now, and they all claim to be very thirsty, yet we're not having much luck getting them to actually drink, end quote. That's the piece that I loved. So let's focus on that. Why does a horse drink? It drinks to fulfill a basic need. And as we know, they will only activate to fulfill that need when the urgency of the need becomes great enough. So the parallel for your leaders is this: identification of a need so relevant to their success in which you can find your opening. Find an organizational problem, find an issue, and it may be strategic, right? The need to improve customer retention because you're shedding customers at an alarming rate. Or it may be far more tactical and operational. Call center handle time is consistently too high and therefore costly. But find one and then begin to drill down with a customer lens versus a business lens. Quantify what you find and show the impact of that of making a change, as well as the roadmap for how that change can be brought about. A story that I'm going to spare you the gory details of, but share with you briefly, happens to be in the care center. By default, that's in my background. But the reason we also go there is that it's customer facing and they have a lot of operational metrics. So one situation we dealt with was a client was the care center we were working with identified the issue of high overtime expense. Ultimately, we were able to track the issue to average handle time and found it was higher actually in the high volume queues. Like I said, I'll spare you the gory details, but suffice it to say, what we did was we found a business problem, we root caused it, quantified it, and applied a CX solution to it. At that point, we had the service vice president's attention as we helped to address a relevant need she had. And from here, we had our first leader advocate. All right, I'm going to move through this quickly as our time is winding down, but I do want to talk about some best practices related to sharing results across the organization. The first one, and let me note here that I said results very explicitly. I didn't say scores and I didn't say metrics, and that was very intentional. As I mentioned, the first best practice aligns to what I was just speaking about. Align the discussion that you're going to have about CX to a business issue. Don't speak of it as a standalone topic. Talk about these metrics as one way to measure progress toward a goal for a larger business initiative, and in the context of other key financial or operational performance indicators. Number 2 and 3 go together here. Brand the program, give it a defined look and feel, and develop an organizational communication strategy. By giving your employees and your teams at the organization an understanding of what to expect when we talk about CX, what it looks like, how it comes across, you're going to get them in a rhythm of expecting CX updates. And finally, number 4 here, don't be the Lone Ranger. Engage others and let them tell their own success stories related to CX. You've got to help partner with and empower your business teams rather than speak of this yourself. And I think a prime example of this was an experience I had where I was replacing a colleague in presenting our quarterly results, CX results, to the entire executive team. My colleague had done all of the legwork, providing me talking points and data, and I started going through that in my update. And I quickly saw that I was losing the interest of my entire audience. So I started speaking rather about key initiatives that drove the scores. And then I engaged the accountable leader to add any context to the stories I was sharing. All of a sudden, all the attention had returned. I was asking these leaders who now to be the champion and share out their own success. And I want to note here that while this is one example with leadership, this can be done at all levels. Beyond the boardroom, find ways to leverage your CX champions, your advocates, your touchpoint owners to really relay their own results to their own teams and provide what support they need. So to wrap on a topic that truly we could have an entire hour-long webinar on, at the end of the day, what I'm really trying to say in all of my comments here is that no one can simply tell someone what to do, how to do it, and expect that it's going to be executed as they intend it to be. CX engagement is cultural, and which it requires the right technology to collect and analyze insights at the right points. It requires processes operationalized based on that insight and a linkage to business outcomes. And it does require integration into the company's overall business strategy. But most importantly, and certainly, well, last but not least, it requires the right people who can take these tools, the technology, the insights, the processes, and to execute on them. So consider that this is truly a holistic success criteria when looking to operationalize a VoC program. And with that, JP, I'm going to hand it back to you to wrap us up.
Thanks, Stacey. Again, in the last minute here, thank you, everyone, for all of your questions. And hopefully we gave you at least some high-level things to think about. I do see a need to have more detailed and in-depth discussions around some of these topic areas. So look for a personal invite from us and our marketing team as we get that content together for you. And on this last slide here is my email address. So if there's something that you want to follow up with from something that you heard today, whether it was from me, Stacey, or Jen, reach out to me and I'd be happy to set up some time to talk. But thank you again. And Tom, that's a wrap from us.
Great. Thanks, JP, and thanks, Jennifer and Stacey, for this presentation. I know a lot of work and time went into addressing all those questions, and everybody's always excited to learn best practices on how to maximize their VoC efforts, and y'all definitely gave them some great insight and based on the questions that were presented, so thank you for that. And so with that, we are going to close the webinar today. We had several questions that were submitted during the presentation, so we'll be checking those out and getting back directly with you if you were one of those that did submit a question. So until next time, have a great remainder of your day. Thank you.